We're live. We're recording live. Shall we start now? Right, good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome Councillor Davis, who is the lead member for adults, to the table, and Julia Love from Health Watch. Just before we start, I would just like to say that they're at the table to assist the committee with their consideration of the issues. So we can ask them questions if we wish to. I'd like to welcome the public and the press. Also, I've invited the Chief Executive to sit in for this. He would be sitting in the next item, but he's also going to sit in on this one. I would like to say it's nice to see almost a full committee. We just have Councillor Lady Barclay missing, who's in London, and of course Councillor Molson has stepped down, and I think he's having a well-earned holiday at the moment. Right, could I have any declarations of interest, please? I've just got one thing to say. In relation to item 4, I am the trustee of the Richard Addison Trust, but the monitoring officer has advised me that the reference in the report to the trust does not require me to declare an interest, as we are not discussing the trust, merely advising that the trust has made funding available to Park House. And just one other thing, Bob will be taking the minutes for this meeting as Andy is away. We have the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 6. Can I have a proposal?
I'll propose those minutes as an accurate record of the meeting.
Yeah.
I'll second them.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? Thank you. We now come on to item 4. The long-term viability of care on the islands. And I would like to ask our officer, Senior Manager, Aisling Khan, to present this paper.
Okay, you will have read the reports and the attachments. This follows a workshop that we held for members of the Scrutiny Committee earlier this year to help refine key lines of inquiry, because adult social care is quite a huge area. So I've structured it around the questions specifically asked by members of this board. So if you've got any further questions, that's fine. I'm afraid I couldn't bring up-to-date budget information up to September. The finance team are still working through that. It should be available in the next couple of days. But the August budget monitoring that you have seen at full council still stands. Currently, adult social care is in place to meet its budget's targets. We'll have to see, obviously, there's a discussion in the paper about how budget shocks are always a worry for lots of our services, but particularly adult social care. If we suddenly have another external placement that we need to commission on the mainland, that could be a budget shock in year of up to £50,000. But currently we haven't got anything on our radar, but we're coming into winter. I also, there was the Richard Addison Trust bit. I think in the kind of toing and froing between myself and Bob, we forgot to put in the figure, and it's a figure of around £2,000. And Park House is incredibly grateful for the support of the Richard Addison Trust in doing some nice refurbishments in the home. And those of you who haven't been there recently will have noticed how smart it's all looking. So basically, this is for you to ask me questions. The key thing I'd like to get out of this is that you support the project initiation document, or the PID, which is a fundamental building block in developing a Treasury business case to pursue public capital to build new facilities for health and social care on the islands.
Before we go to the floor for questions. Could I ask the lead member for adults if he's got any comments to make on this paper?
Oh, thank you.
You've taken me a little bit by surprise. I have various points I was wanting to bring up as we went along. I've attended at the last board meeting producing the PID, which is now addressing the immediate plans for the combined unit. We're presented with 11 different options on the hub, a word which I also see that we're not using anymore, with which I would thoroughly concur. I find it difficult myself to keep 11 options in my head in one go, but I think that I've made my position clear in the past. I'm concerned that the hospital is doing. It's very difficult. I don't wish to be critical, but it's the way trends have moved for various reasons. The occupancy in the hospital has gone down in recent years. For the last few years, when I've not been involved, I have been involved in the extent of seeing the helicopter going backwards and forwards, taking patients to the mainland far more than it did when we had doctors here. That this is where I find it difficult. Should I say, don't take as wide a remit as was taken in the past, and this is for cultural reasons as much as anything else. Obviously, general practice has moved a long way in recent years, and I think that some of you will understand that some of the changes in general practice has not been necessary to the benefit of the patients as a whole, and I'm speaking nationally now. I'm very much aware of the CQC report on our primary care services here. Nevertheless, the governance of general practice in the islands has now left these islands, and we have very little input. And this is reflected in the discussions that we've had or been having over the PID, the document, which is going to try and set out the way forward. There were 12 of us sitting around the table. 6 were adult social care or council members, two members, and the staff from this authority. 6 were from the mainland, one who was a clinical lead, but from the mainland, so there was virtually no representation from clinicians on these islands. Clinicians on these islands who actually provide the service, and I find this very worrying. The plans being made are obviously going to be for the next 50 years or so, and we're all well aware of the inadequacy of the fabric of the services, which only, I think, goes to reflect even better on the staff who are working in difficult conditions. And the recent CQC at Park House, I will say it again, is so commendable, but this is down almost entirely to the way our staff are working and the staff are manning the services, providing the services, should I say, and particularly the lower paid ones who day in, day out, 24/7 are looking after our elderly and frail in such a good way. The other thing that concerns me about the lack of mention is the lack of use of the word dementia and the provision of dementia care on the islands. It does get a mention, but it's not actually spoken of in the fabric. If we're using the hospital less, dementia is an illness, and as I see it, there should be provision for dementia built into the fabric. In other words, there should be a unit. that cares specifically for dementia. Dementia ideally does need a unit where patients can be looked after in the best possible way. It could double up for normal, should I say, not challenged patients from that point of view. But without it, we would be failing without some change in the fabric, we will not be providing the best services for the people who are projected and the people who are presently suffering this dreadful condition. So those are my two main worries. Apart from the fact that I still believe that in order to protect the staff, which I've already referred to in our residential home, that if we're not careful, if we have a hybrid workforce, and this I find is contradictory in this day and age, if you have a hybrid workforce that's trying to provide caring services for all people, you're going to lose the specialization which is inherent in the present structure. So if we're not careful, at the moment the staff in Park House, as I say, are a standalone little team, or larger team now, thank heavens, who go the extra mile and work together and provide, as we've seen, as we know, as has been shown by the prize won and the CQC, a team. Now, if that's amalgamated into a hybrid, and the word is used, caring staff, who are also responsible for what's now the MRU, and I would like to see that expanded so that more medicine is done here. And I think there is some move towards the recognition that we do need to get back to some of the some of the clinical care that falls between general practice and emergency care. Some emergency care can be done here, and in fact, in some instances, would be better done here. And it's bad medicine at times to as well as expensive medicine, to put somebody in a helicopter. Yes, it passes the buck elsewhere, but it isn't necessarily the best way of treating that patient. I think. Thank you, Chairman. I think I've said enough.
Thank you. Have you got any comments to make on Councillor Davis's?
Firstly, but if we talk about the workforce, on the Integration Programme Board, it actually sits Anita Bedford as the Integrated Care Manager for the islands, Dr. Chris Picken, who's the lead GP, and Claudia Schwartz, who's the Residential Care Manager. I don't think they were at the meeting. Well, Claudia was there. They weren't at the meeting you attended the other day, Adrian, because they had other commitments, but they do come. We are planning, got 2 workshops coming on the 8th and 9th of November, where the entire frontline workforce is getting together to design a new model of care. All the indications from the workforce who work in all areas of the system is that they're incredibly positive about what we're trying to do here, and that actually, if you've seen a CQC report, we already do work very closely with all our health and social care colleagues. The input of pharmacy, the input of nursing care into residential care, and that all the new estate will do is just facilitate that to an even greater level. Dementia is mentioned. The Frail elderly pathway is the priority pathway that we're redesigning here, and obviously that encompasses dementia care, and that will sit at the very heart of it. We are also commissioning a new island-based mental health resource, which will support people with dementia as of now. There's an email going to the Health and Wellbeing Board this week just to agree the funding. I think also we talk a lot about in the PID about redesigning outpatients, and that is where we can absolutely start delivering more services on the islands. The whole area around urgent care is also being explored about whether we can have an MIU plus, drawing on the resources in the South West Ambulance team. So the entire project is about how do we design a system that's going to be fit for purpose for the next 30 years and support the fact that we have one of the most rapidly aging populations in the country, and also one of the most dwindling working age populations in the country. So the whole PID is about what does that look like and what are the associated infrastructure aspects to support that. And for me, it's housing. So it's a holistic appraisal of what is the health and social care estate itself, as well as the associated housing, to make sure that this is resilient into the future. But huge amounts of work has gone into it, and there's been a lot of input from frontline professionals, and we wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't that kind of interest and enthusiasm to work in this way.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, referring to this document, the PID, it was very interesting reading and clearly a very good document. Just referring to those estate solutions, I mean, I think we can get confused with them being 11, but actually, I think if you break them down, it's essentially variations on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options. So it's perhaps not as complicated.
We have to remember that we are not masters of this entire project. We are one partner, so we've got to work with NHS Property Services, with the current providers of health and social care, and with commissioners on the mainland. So we're basically going through. The options are split out in that way as a very specific aspect of how you put together a Treasury Green Book business case. And so we've got oversight on this from somebody that we are employing through the One Public Estate funding called Clive Shaw, who has done business cases for numerous bits of health and social care estate in the country. And he's also one of the panel of experts for One Public Estate. So we're taking some really good advice here on how you frame a business case. And I think it is really sensible, if we're going to do this, is that we do look at all options, because I know the word hub, I think getting to the solution before you've worked out what the service looks like or the problem is a danger. So we just don't want to kind of get too specific. I think it's pretty clear where we'll probably end up, what the best case scenario is, but I just don't want to discount anything. Because there are lots of gateways in this project where we might not be successful. So we're going to go for public capital next year, actually. If we don't get it, what do we do next? Because obviously, to this point, it's been a democratic wish of the Council of the Isles of Scilly that we support residential care on the islands. Therefore, we need to accept the financial implications of that and its impact on other services. Yeah.
Just to sort of check some nitty gritty, just on page 53, has the NHS England Regional Director of Finance actually signed this off?
No, Scrutiny's the first people to see it. So It's going to be walked around. So how I'm thinking of it in my head, because again, you've got to get this all approved kind of simultaneously, is that if Scrutiny are supportive, then you can make that recommendation to full council on the 8th of November. If full council is supportive, I'm going to make a recommendation that one member of the authority is given, is delegated, that if there are any amendments that come through from other partners, that they can agree them in a smaller kind of environment, rather than me coming back saying, NHS England said, can you add this sentence? And then NHS Kerno say, can you add this sentence? And that is the complication of making this work. And it's exactly what Councillor Davis has alluded to in the past. The fragmentation of the NHS does mean we have got to go to various stakeholders to get sign up to this. So no, full council will probably be the first. And I think all the other committees happen within November.
So NHS England will actually come back to this when we've assessed it in full council. Is that... That's what you said.
It hasn't gone to them yet, so it's about to be walked around. So you're getting first dibs.
Okay. Just on the bottom page 51, regarding the there's some figures sort of missing there to be confirmed. Could you just comment on those, please? Bottom of page 51.
I'm not numbered that way. Where is
cost estimates. Recurrent revenue impacts.
Okay, so it's a bit, I get see what you mean.
Sorry.
Yeah, but that's exactly what needs to be worked through in the outline business case.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, to be honest, I know the revenue and life cycle costs for Park House. They've yet to be established for the community hospital.
Okay.
So it's just because obviously for the hospital and the provision of services there, they need to separate what is part of the contract specifically for the Isles of Scilly, which isn't as straightforward as one might think.
Okay.
Because they obviously get a lump contract to deliver community health across the piece, and so which bit relates exactly to this locality. So we're working through with the finance director at the moment.
Okay. Just a wider question really about sort of strategy. I mean, I know you and I have talked at length about off-island access.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of that in this paper, which was a slight concern to me in terms of how do off-islanders access healthcare on St Mary's or the mainland, and that to me seems to be quite an important strategic thing that should be in there. Could you just comment on that, please?
We can amplify that. I mean, the whole point is it's meant to be addressing geographical challenges, But yeah, I can amplify a point about off-island access.
Personally, I would say that's, yeah, that is a missing point at the moment.
Fine.
Thank you.
Councillor Nellams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask a question on, it's in the section services, number 4. It says there are further plans to commission the integrated mental health service, but particularly a befriending scheme through the Better Care Fund. How will that work practically, the befriending scheme?
I'm bringing a proposal to Health and Wellbeing Board in November. We have, the Health and Wellbeing Board has approved a series of schemes, and one of them was about social isolation. And currently we don't have a commission project in place. So having talked to partners and reflected on schemes that we've done previously, we think a really simple befriending project would be a good idea. So we've made contact with a few providers on the mainland who've run similar projects, and then we'll go out to the market if elected members approve it. So it's a very simple. We know that there are some people on the islands who don't have enough social contact. That impacts on, firstly, their demand for services, but also their outcomes. So we just thought, we think there's enough potential volunteers on the island that would go and hang out with people who need a bit of a chat or be taken out and connected with their community.
Absolutely, but it would be sort of, it would come through us.
Be nice.
In general.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a general comment, really, on page 49, on the glaring comment about Scilly having the most rapidly growing population in the country, 40 years, in fact, ahead of the mainland, which is quite surprising. I know the Americans refer to Florida as God's waiting room, and it appears that Scilly is heading in the same direction.
I mean, one thing to remember with that is that we have one of the most rapidly aging populations, but we also have one of the healthiest aging populations. So aging isn't necessarily a problem. It's a problem if you don't live well and you have an unhealthy old age. So actually, we've got huge assets there. So how do we make sure that as many people as possible age well and get care at exactly the right moment to support that? But yes, that is the significant issue. And I think one of the things about this project is that it's not we're not just asking for capital, but we're asking to test out new models of provision. It's a bit like that consistent theme that we're developing as a local authority, which is to have leadership of the things that worry us rather than sitting back and saying, please, can you fund it to sort us out? We think that what we could develop here takes off a lot of the kind of principles of sustainable transformation plans up and down the country, which is how do you support an aging population with more and more complex needs? How do you make better use of aging estate, which is a big issue? And there are lots of community hospitals falling apart all over the country, and particularly in Cornwall. How can we use them better? How can we redirect funding from back office functions to the front line? Which is daft that you have organisations all with their own separate IT functions, finance functions, when actually what you want is people who are nurses and doctors and carers. So it's about redesigning things. So what we think here is that we can pioneer a new model of care which can be replicated up and down the country, and particularly in more remote communities.
Councillor Davis.
It does seem as though we are getting older very much more quickly. But it isn't my point of view anyway. There is a small but a marked trend at the moment of elderly people actually leaving this island. So I think that you have to always have the caveat that the projections do not always follow the way one imagines they're going to go. There's two corrections or things that I didn't mention. One is I'd just like to make it quite clear that the parade flats, which are referred to in going back to the 11 different options, are not part of the Park House. It's not one of the 4. So that brings the 3 requirements down to the 4 requirements down to 3. And the other one is that there is mention in several of them of accommodation over the shop, as it were. This is something that actually went out many years ago. Carers don't want and should not be asked to live over the shop. They certainly need to get away environmentally, and I think that we should make it quite clear that whatever plans are made, that the accommodation, which I think really obviously ought to be ring-fenced and hopefully will be built into our building scheme, is not actually on the hub site, because carers, this certainly will impact upon recruitment, if nothing else.
I think we've got to be mindful of the challenges we have in terms of available sites. So I don't think we can discount any options at this stage. I think the most important thing is to identify housing, its location. We all know what would be ideal, but it's also going to be about what we can actually achieve.
Jane Hurd.
Yes, Chairman. Can I ask for clarification on the options on pages 3 and 4? That's 1 to 11 on what is liable to be considered in drawing up the business case. I'm a little bit concerned about this disposal of St Mary's Community Hospital, in that I think Ashling's covered the questions of the MRU and perhaps MRU plus, which would be ideal. What about people that come back or have to stay in hospital for a couple of days to avoid having to go to the mainland, or people that are able to be discharged quicker from a mainland hospital because they'll get a couple of days care in the hospital here? What provisions being made for them?
That's all in there. That's the whole idea, is that it actually is to support exactly step up, step down services. When it talks about disposal of the hospital, it doesn't mean disposal of hospital services. It means of the current building to release a state to invest elsewhere. So what we might end up with looking like is that it might be, you might see a reduction in bed-based services, but an increase in services. And it's just making sure that the buildings actually offer what people actually need. So, for example, the hospital was designed with 2 general wards. Our care home was designed for people who were ambulant. All those needs have changed. So what is the best solution for what we currently need? And step up, step down is exactly right, because then you prevent bed blocking, you get people back home, out of Chalisk. So definitely that's an essential aspect of the service that we want to capture.
This would be an NHS facility, not health and social care.
We haven't got to who's in charge yet. This is not about this. This is about people who are working in the services, designing them and working them, and then the governance model will fall out of that. We don't decide now whether it's NHS, but almost definitely, yes, NHS would operate.
Yeah, you get my gist, that if they're in hospital and they need to be in hospital, although perhaps not an acute hospital, then surely that's NHS care.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to say this is really good information. Finally, I think I've got my head around what adult social care, or some of the strands adult social care is doing. So I want to say thank you very much to Bob and to Aisling for writing the paper. I've got some questions on the PID and social care generally. So I'll start with the PID, and at the end of the document, it mentions Carl Thomas for the first time. So is there in what relation to the rest of the project is that? So
that's an available site for development,
okay,
and most potentially for housing.
Right, okay. Also the figures that Jonathan mentioned, are they going to be the recurring costs? Because obviously that's of importance to us in that the Park House, the cost of Park House, we can't see that pressure going, I wouldn't like to see that pressure going up, raising at all. So how's that going to be managed in the context of improving this period? That's
much more about the ongoing costs of the estate. Now, Park House, we haven't actually been spending a lot of money, so we don't have a huge amount of kind of capital revenue costs that we would save in looking after the estate currently. Mm-hmm. But the hospital, they do. They've got quite a lot of backlog maintenance, and there's an ongoing kind of.
But it's about the
and it's about the system. It's about the system. I think what we would have to, the whole point of doing this outline business case is to understand what does the revenue gap end up being if we do have this new estate model, and working out whether there will be efficiency savings, and if there aren't efficiency savings, can those savings be made in other ways? Mm.
Yeah, well, given the eye-watering costs of maintaining the properties, especially the hospital, then
absolutely. I think the thing is, we've got to balance, like what I believe mainly with this new model of care is that what you'll get is confidence on what you'll be spending year on year on year, rather than kind of sort of lurching from crisis to crisis. Mm. So it gives you a sustainable model. I don't necessarily think that you're going to be saying you're going to spend less money in future on adult social care, but you will have confidence that that will be what you spend for the next 5 to 10 years, which I think is the best that most local authority areas can hope for, because that's actually, if you look at what's going on nationally, local authorities are not predicting their adult social care budget effectively year on year, because levels of demand are just fluctuating in such a dramatic way. So that's what I think, it will just give you confidence about what you'll be investing to the future.
Okay, so
don't want to lead anyone down the garden path and saying, say we're spending £1 million adult social care now, I'm saying you'll be spending 750,000. But what I might be able to say to you is it will be £1 million for the next 5 years, which might be the best you can hope for because you've got rising levels of demand.
Okay, so you're minimising the shocks, which is great. So the specifics in the PID, it says that we're going to need to spend about 170k on Park House for remedial capital works and 100 grand on parade flats. But in the PID, it says we're going to spend 10k to keep Park House going for the next 3 years.
Yes,
until this project comes out. That seems like a bit of a gap, a bit of a. Is that going to be enough? Is that going to be?
It will be enough until we get to the conclusions of this report. If pursuing this new estate model isn't successful, we are going to have to think about that investment.
Okay.
And actually, probably that investment itself isn't the point. We're actually going to have to look at a new facility, and therefore the local authority. If we end up saying we're going to have to do a standalone residential care model, is then there'll have to be options then about how that might be financed through borrowing, etc.
Okay.
My hope is that by doing this, we've got the best possible chance of public capital funding.
Fine. Okay. The last point on the PID was that it says the programme board report to Island Futures Health and Wellbeing Board and Shaping Our Futures programme is not. Full council a better place for the reports to go to. It seems that it's more regular, it's more, there's more of a democratic representation of full council. I just don't want to end up like we see in the next paper, where there's an assumption of approval rather than actual approval. So I mean, maybe that's a discussion that we can have.
I mean, I can absolutely bring, you can see the minutes, it's, you know, they're totally transparent, they're totally publicly available. That can absolutely come to full council for information.
And it's just about having that decision out in the public domain.
Well, the PID is the first actual decision, and that is coming to full council. But if you would like, if for reassurance, to just know how it's all ticking along in terms of the Integration Programme Board, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm just wary that if decisions are made and then other decisions come from those decisions that...
I mean, the very nature of the Integrated Programme Board is that we have decision-making, delegated decision-making abilities within our own organisation, but I can't make the decisions for health, so we have to keep coming back to our respective organisations. You know, yeah. So I actually, I mean, I have a statutory role in terms of leadership of what goes on here, but I cannot decide how many fly-offs there are. What we do with the hospital, I need to work with partners to kind of design that with them.
Yeah, and I'm just interested in getting enough public momentum around it so the public
absolutely,
knows
absolutely.
what's going on,
I'm totally happy to bring
repercussions of those decisions. The only other thing I was going to ask was in the main paper, the market forces supplement that's subsidised by the BCF at the moment.
By BCF.
That runs out in 2022. There's obviously a gap there. If we don't get this hub, not the hub, so this project in place, what are the implications on finances and that market forces supplement? And
well, the IBCF is confirmed till 2022, but there's an expectation it will continue. So that will become a budget pressure as we get nearer the time. And it is a budget pressure, but it's not a budget pressure for next year, which is what I'm dealing with currently.
Okay. Fine, thank you.
Yes. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the project, we're not going to call it the hub. Yeah, as we said, you know, it's a very interesting bit of work, and it's clearly we need solutions. Now, the timescales for this are, I would say, you know, from the public's point of view, I think it'd be fantastic if this is in place by 2022. To me, that seems pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
So there's a question to me around at what point, if the project weren't going to happen, what is Plan B, and at what point do you recognise that is the case? Because obviously that has a massive implications for us as a local authority.
I think that will happen in the next few months. So currently, I am writing a bid to one public estate to fund the full business case, which will cost probably around £500,000. So we are just working out now what the actual ask will be. And then if there is a gap, how do we work with partners to fill that gap? What would be the contribution of the local authority and other partners? So that it's all relative to kind of the ask of the public capital project. We're going to go for public capital next summer. So those are the kind of two key gateways where we'll kind of get a sense. The other thing, obviously, there are options if we don't get public capital to come back to members and then finance committees all around Cornwall about other alternative forms of finance, and there are. So there is lift finance, and which, you know, has been successful in other parts of the country. There's been a slightly hairy time in Cornwall, so it has developed a bit of a bad name. That's how Truro Health Park was funded, but there are models where it does work. So that just needs to keep coming back to members.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll give you some advice.
Yeah, thank you. Just referring on to Park House report, I thought it was great reading, really. I mean, I think it was, you know, I think everybody should be very encouraged by that. And clearly an independent view on the quality of care in Park House is very reassuring. My question really was just, do you want to aspire to excellence? And if so, how do you get there?
Yeah, I think if we can sustain these changes over time, that's usually how it works. I think we are aiming for outstanding. I think I nearly did challenge, particularly on the well-led bit, I did nearly challenge to get to the outstanding, and then I thought, no, we'll wait. We'll just let embed things first. And there are many aspects of why Park House is working so well, and it's all come together. And it's about individuals who work in there, it's about the culture, and it's about leadership. But I just don't want us to get bogged down in the idea that it's about an individual only. And Claudia Schwartz is exceptional, but we are building services which are sustainable. And if Claudia leaves, we need to have a great service still in place. And there's a huge framework that supports these excellent services, as well as obviously some really excellent individuals. But it's not sensible to keep thinking it's about a person.
Yep.
It's about systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was good. Just want to pick up on page 4 regarding the pay. There seems to be a figure a bit out of date. The national average pay of social care being £7.32 an hour. That must be out of date because minimum wage is £7.83.
Oh my God! Wait, yeah.
So my question then was just about, you know, I completely understand there's massive budget pressures and there's this difficult balance to be struck. But you know, if we're paying £8.20 to £8.69, which is, you know, a little bit above minimum wage. You know, it depends how you define competitive, and I completely understand, you know, the difficulties around that. But just wonder if you can comment on that.
Well, the job is evaluated at that level, which we are reviewing. But there's also the market forces supplement. So we pay more than the market does nationally. And that's the key point there. You're absolutely right. When I wrote those paragraphs, I did take it from the papers I wrote at the time of closure, so it's slightly out of date. But the point being, we pay above market rates. It's not the lowest paid work on the islands, which it usually is in any other community, which is why people go and work in Aldi rather than provide care.
Yeah.
And obviously there are enhancements because our workers are tied to the Green Book. So if you do antisocial hours, weekends, bank holidays, you get enhancements as well. We don't have, I mean, obviously everyone would like to get paid more money, but we have a real belief in Park House, and I think the team subscribe to it, that it's not just about pay, it's about esteem. And the big thing we've done for Park House is, compared to where we were when we thought we were going to close, where working in Park House, it was one of the worst jobs on the island. I think now people believe it's one of the best. And every time we recruit now, people are applying for the jobs, and they're people that live here. So word has gone round, it's not a bad place. You get to go to awards ceremonies, you get praised. CQC reports really help. Being told by external bodies that you're doing a really great job, I think, is an essential aspect. And I think the more we hold those people in our workforce in high regard and make it clear to them how highly we regard them, then that will improve. And that's what's going to keep people. Yeah, they really love their job.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good. Last question was really around the savings in section E, page 9. I mean, yeah, you alluded to the fact there's no finance report available, which is frustrating, to be honest. I'm not saying that's a criticism, but I do feel like really it hasn't answered the question as such, so I kind of recommend that this comes back to us, because we haven't got a detailed financial savings.
Because I haven't been asked for any savings. I wasn't asked for savings this year. I made that clear in the report. So what you've had is budget monitoring, and you had budget monitoring to last full council, What you don't have is this month's budget monitoring, which I'm really keen to bring to you, because actually we've done quite a lot of work with the finance team to recode things along various lines. The key thing for you is the bottom line is fine. But what we need to be able to do, because when we did our workshop, you remember, I wasn't able to give you year-on-year trends in the way that I need to.
Yeah.
And now we're getting things coded properly. It means that this time next year, I'll be able to say to you, we're spending more on, for example, catering or more on agency. But we haven't been able to do that because I have not been able to do a like-for-like comparison over the last 4 or 5 years because things have kept moving around. The other thing we need to be able to track more effectively is income month on month, not year on year, because I get given this kind of idea of the income targets, but income targets in this sector are really, really hard with the scale of population. So if you're saying you need to get £200,000, I've got no way of making that happen because it all depends on the number of people who need residential care and the number of those who are self-funders, and that's unpredictable. Unless you say, ask me to go and find only self-funders, which of course is not the purpose of adult social care.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I find this, I think it'd be very helpful to have as much budget information as possible in this area to really understand where the income and the expenditure. And I'd really like to see that coming to us.
Well, that's the hope, and that's what they're working through. So I've just done some detailed work to unpack adult social care budget, but you did have that at the last full council. And you did get told that adult social care finances are on track. How it gets spent across the budget lines, that also I did discuss with you at the workshop.
It's understanding the trends as well. Yeah.
That you won't have a trend till next year.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's very valuable for us, I think, to have when we can have it. Thank you.
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, just going back to the staffing issue. So obviously, it's really good. We've got a really good member of staff at the moment. How is the service making sure that there's good succession planning in place and that staff are being able to progress up?
That's all through, we're doing a huge amount of training in the team. So we've got 7 people went through MVQs. It's how I think you make things sustainable and silly is that you create career prospects that are interesting. So normally, before when we went out to recruit a registered care manager, we're not necessarily marketing an entirely interesting career, and actually it sounds all a bit stressful. I think if, for example, we have social workers who find new employment elsewhere, what we can now sell is a really, really strong job offer, essentially. Come and run a great care home on the Isles of Scilly where we are developing new models of care for the future. And that's what's important. That's exactly what we agree in health is also the issue, is that you are selling something that which is attractive. Because I can't assume succession planning in its strict sense where you're saying, okay, we will train the next level down to do my job when I go. That's not always going to be possible in a small community like Scilly. So I think you always would actually like to have new people coming in with new ideas and stuff. And the way to do that is to make sure that what you're offering is attractive.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay.
We have, like, for example, we've done the same in children's social care. So our children's social care manager is excellent. And we've had really great Ofsteds. And so therefore we get people saying to us when we go to conferences, please let me know when you're advertising that job. That's what you do, create a bit of noise.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, sorry.
Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just like to say congratulations all round on the inspector's report on Park House. But the more I read of it, the more I wondered why it was only rated as good and not higher than that. I must confess, I haven't been in Park House for, a number of years. One of the reasons is because of my advanced age, I'd be afraid they wouldn't let me out again. But the report I thought was excellent, apart from a couple of very small niggles, such as limited dental and optician access and so on. But on the whole, I think a far better rating than good was
I think
deserved.
you're right, Steve. I couldn't find one big thing that would have made the difference. There's like a few suggestions, and that's fine. And I think that's the thing. When they come back next time, we can address all those smaller suggestions. And I think then I will absolutely argue it's outstanding. And we should be so proud on these islands. Less than 50% of care homes get good or outstanding. And you see horror stories all the time. So it's something I'm so proud of all our team. care they give. We had the Safeguarding Adults Board chairman came over recently, and she came for lunch at Park House, and she said she would place her mum there. And there was one bit where a care worker, her little girl was poorly, so she had to charge off to go and fetch her. And 2 other colleagues said, I'll do your shift for you. And she said she had never, ever heard the conversation like that in all her years of going around care homes. And those are the things that matter. And that's what we've got to kind of protect in any new development, is how people on Scilly care for each other. It's really good.
Anybody else before I ask a question? I just wondered if you could explain or clarify the business case process. Is there going to be a business case for each option, or are you going to wait until you've chosen the options to get a business case? And to clarify, who approves the option analysis and who approves the business case?
Well, that bit is all the partners that we've described.
Yeah.
So it's full council and then all the NHS committees.
Right.
In terms of how the business case develops, what will happen is that all the options will be tested against the general economic model, which is the next bit that we need to commission. I have never done one before, so bear with me. But yes,
okay.
It's kind of both, Avril.
Okay.
It's a simultaneous process of going through the options and also doing a business case bit against each.
Yeah. So in September 2016, we actually agreed an estate options model service. So what's happened to that? Is that just... That's all...
I know you have agreed it, but the NHS hasn't gone on that journey with us. And also, in
Got
order to do a Treasury business case, you need to do it again from scratch. So we're following a kind of rigid process here.
Right.
And then what we agreed at full
you did tell me who represents the council on the board. Is it our lead member for adults?
So it is actually an operational board, but we have now decided that we have invited elected members because this is so significant. So we have been inviting now Councillor Gothic, Councillor Davis, and Councillor Francis. I'm there, and then so is my adult social care manager, as is Claudia.
Okay. Is this a substantial variation or a development of services that would require a formal consultation?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we haven't done it yet. But once we've got the proposal, it absolutely needs to come to scrutiny.
Yes, that's okay. Has anybody got any more questions? Right. Take the recommendations. We'll take recommendations 1 to council, that members approve the draft project initiation document for the Isles of Scilly Health and Social Care Integration Programme with regard to the consideration made by the Scrutiny Committee. Could I have a proposer, please?
Chairman, I'd just like to change in the terms of reference for the Isles of Scilly Integrated Health and Social Care Programme Board. Just like further discussion about whether that should report to full council or the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Right. So that's separate. So on the PID bit, if I look at it and just amplify something on Five Islands aspect of it, it's a PID bit, okay, and then there's another recommendation maybe around terms of reference for the programme board.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't link to the PID.
Okay, so the PID is okay, given the fact that there's no recurring costs in there, but I would propose that that's fine, so.
So we want to make that a recommendation.
Well, you've taken recommendation 1 about approving the PID, which is being proposed by Councillor Marcus.
Right.
And then the second recommendation, I think, is suggested that you have change it, amendments to the terms of recommendations of the board.
Okay.
So you need a seconder for that.
Right, could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Councillor Smith, all those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Recommendations Is that supposed to be two committee?
I think if the senior manager concurs that the thread of the discussion around a subsequent recommendation is around the clarification of the terms of reference for the integration board.
Well, I think it's a bit more specific recommendation, isn't it? That in governance, that it will report to full council.
Yeah.
And that minutes of meetings will be circulated for information. Isn't that the specific recommendation?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Is that circulated to all members then, presumably? Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want a proposal for that now, do you? Could I have a proposal?
So with those amendments, I propose that recommendation.
Thank you. Seconder, please.
Yes, I'll second that.
Councillor Smith, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Right, thank you very much. We go on to item 5. Yes, certainly.
Teo, do you want me?
I forgot to read something out at before we started item 4, which I'd just like to read out now. It's unfortunate these two papers of considerable interest have been late. I believe there are two aspects: how we structure our scrutiny review process and make best use of officer time. Secondly, to make sure the report assurance process in place works for scrutiny. And I would like to ask the officer to take full account of these points in the 2-year review of scrutiny that he is preparing.
Yes, certainly very happy to do so, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm sorry that should have been read out before. I take item 5. I would like to thank the Chief Executive for engaging with and supporting the process, and also other officers. This is a reflective process so that we can learn and improve. I would like to ask Bog to introduce this report and after invite the Chief Executive to comment before opening up for members' questions.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I will take the report as read. Again, apologies, this is quite a lengthy paper. It did come out late. This was subject to quite a lot of discussion and ensuring there was appropriate sign-off for the report. There's a couple of very brief comments I'd like to make in terms of the fact that Appendix B is the overarching collaboration agreement. This is redacted because of personal information in the nature of signatures that were included. The schedules 1 and 2, because of the scale they were printed at, are also not included, but these are represented in paragraphs 7 and 8 of the report. And also, finally, for clarification, the total in table 1 on page 71 is of the total fixed and variable cost is 820,000. This is the correct figure. In paragraph 38, there is reference to a previous calculation, £853,000. This is incorrect and should be replaced by 820,000. Thank you very much. And if you have a kind of particular queries about maybe some aspects of the report that might be appropriate for me for answer, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I would request you direct your questions to the Chief Executive, who I think will just say a few words now in terms of introduction himself. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's quite interesting to look at the 2 items for this scrutiny session, because really at the nub of it, or really the heart of the 2 items, of course, is around collaboration and partnership. I think what we saw at the previous discussion very clearly is that the council is a partner and tries to establish proper collaboration with other partners across our patch. Because I think we have to come to realize that collaboration is the only way forward to deliver better services to our community. And I think it's a new way of working, a new way of operating, but I think we're getting better at it as a local authority. We started this process really about 3-4 years ago, and we're slightly getting better. We were getting better in how this works. I think the other theme, which is, I think, quite important for me, that is emerging, is that as a local authority, we're actually quite innovative and quite creative. So we'll always keep pushing for new models of service delivery, new models of governance that will deliver better for our community. And I think that is something that is also emerging from the corporate plan, where this council very clearly and members very clearly articulate that innovation, new models of operation, look at the answer silly. We will be leading on that. So having said all that, this report came about following a set of questions from members back in the spring. The questions are in appendix of the report and the response that I provided. I think it is worth highlighting again or reiterating again why we are collaborating and why we do work in partnership with others. And first and foremost, it is about improving performance. It's about improving the services or improving the activities that we deliver for our community. That is the first objective. Second objective is, I think we're all aware, we work in a very small environment with very limited budget. So it is important that we build in resilience. Resilience to assure that services continue to be delivered at high quality to our residents, and resilience so that we are actually legally compliant as well. And then the final objective, of course, is around being more efficient and more efficient with our resources, which could be another word for savings, but we're trying to reduce the cost of our operations to remain within our financial envelope. I think the collaboration we have established with our neighbouring authority is quite interesting. It's not unique in the UK that local authorities work together, but what is unique, though, is that we are trying to do this in the true sense of collaboration, whereby each authority looks at its own strengths and its capacity and then tries to identify how we can support each other by working better together or by collaborating properly. The majority of arrangements that are available in the UK are very much around kind of service level agreements, or where local authorities create companies. What we are trying to do is to collaborate and maintain very, very strongly the democratic input on both sides, and we're trying to merge that and bring that together. Report provides a bit of background on why we are collaborating. It provides a bit of background on governance, and then, of course, it highlights the scope of collaboration which we have been working on for the last year. And that scope was agreed by members. And so the scope is around some legacy arrangement. It's kind of mopping up, if you like, the arrangements that have been in place, some of which 20, 30 years, but we're trying to formalize that slightly. The arrangements around sharing some statutory officers, because clearly as a very small local authority, we do not have the resources to have all the statutory officers locally. The arrangements around the delegation of the IT and finance function and what that means in terms of systems and processes. The arrangements we have put in place for fire and rescue, the arrangements for the local authority designated officer, the LADO, and finally the arrangements of where we are in relation to waste and waste management. So I think I'll leave it here and then answer questions from members.
Any questions? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you very much. It's definitely a very detailed report. It took quite a few readings to get my head around, but it's really good to see it all in one place, and I'd like to thank the officer, I think, for compiling this report. So well done, Bob, and thanks to the Chief Exec as well for giving information for the report. Firstly, can I just start with the finances, just on page 71. So we've got 820,000, just need to get it right in my head, there's 820,000 a year. Is that for just Schedule 2, or is that for Schedule 1 and Schedule 2?
That is for both, but again, they're very provisional figures. But it is both, includes the legacy.
And that doesn't include the variable amounts for legal and things like that?
It's a tricky one because, as you said, there are some variable amounts. For instance, the coroner. Yeah? For coroner
services, yeah.
Those, yeah. We budget every year £15,000, yeah? And that is the figure that is reflected in here. However, those services, or the cost of those services, are entirely dependent how often the coroner is required to do an investigation. So, for instance, for last year, the cost for coroner services was about £2,000. But it can also quite easily go up to £30,000. It's a very tricky one. So there are a number of figures in here for which we budget, but not necessarily spend. And we don't know the spend until the end of the financial year. That's similar with legal. The current arrangement that we have in place with Cornwall Council is a service level agreement. So there's no delegation, it's nothing, it's not a contract, it's a service level agreement where we have agreed the fees or the rates, if you like, and it is pay as you go in terms of tapping into those services. We believe we can do this more efficient by eventually moving towards a different arrangement, either a delegated arrangement or a fixed cost arrangement. But we haven't reached that stage yet. At this point in time, it's a service level agreement based on pay as you go. So again, so we budget for a certain amount, and sometimes we go under, sometimes we go up, depending how we need to respond.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a large amount of money that obviously it's delivering services over here, essential services, but it's also money that's leaving the islands as well. And as a percentage of the total council budget, and I know that some of it's paid for by grants, etc., so there's no impact, but it is a sizable percentage. So it's just good, I think, that that information is out there, and it's good with better financial reporting that we can get a handle on that amount and be aware of what money is we're paying for those services.
I think we need to be careful that money is leaving the islands, because it's not. All the money that's invested is invested in delivering the services and improving services on the islands. None of these investments deliver services elsewhere. Yeah. Also, I think we need to be clear, there are a number of contracts that form part of the Schedule 1, particularly, say around fostering, for instance. Yeah? So there are contracts in place that deliver services for the Isles and the residents.
Yeah, no, I'm aware that, in fact, like I said at the start of that comment, we're delivering essential services over here, but that's the balance we've got to find, isn't it? And with that collaboration is the delivery of those services, whether you have people over here doing it or you commission people outside to deliver those services here. So by the very nature you're paying, we'd argue semantics.
Yeah.
Let's not do that anymore. So yeah, and that kind of links to, I think, one of the paragraphs here about, I can't find that paragraph, about the jobs that have been lost since the collaboration has happened. Yeah, paragraph 53 on page 74 at the top there. The loss of 10 posts, which obviously is an impact of several hundred thousand, of at least £100,000 on the economy, and the fact that these jobs still remain in the establishment list, is there any plan to change that at all? What's the...
Well, clearly, the objective of the collaboration agreement and the subsequent schedules for specific projects, there is no objective to reduce jobs on the island. It is, as I said before, it's about creating a strong service and improve the performance. The way that these arrangements were put in place was that the staff that were delivering those functions on the islands were offered to transfer under COSOP arrangements, it's kind of two-pay arrangement, COSOP arrangements, to continue to deliver those jobs on the islands. Yeah? So basically what changed was wherever the payslip came from. That was the main thing that changed. Of course, it's then up to the individuals whether they wish to remain on the islands or whether they wish to seek other opportunities. That's not something that we have in hand. What we do have in hand and what we do control is then to assure that the right services are delivered on the islands as required. And that is an ongoing discussion with the steering group of the governance structure and the individual functions that are being delivered, how this can be best done and in the most effective way this can be done.
Yeah, I think there is still a, there's kind of, even if it's circumstantial, a link between those services moving, even, you know, saying that it's just a pay slip, it's different, it's a different way of working, they're delivering a service described by someone else rather than here, so it's a different job than they originally applied for. So yeah, it's just a concern that those risks are now here, and there is that change and that less kind of, you're outsourcing the governance and the control, not the control, because we still control stuff here, you would argue that, but we're outsourcing that that impact that the population here has on the service. So before, so we've had that with the council tax reminders. Previously, there was someone here to talk to, and you could go and sort that out. And now you can still go and sort that out quite easily, but it's a phone call. They're people as well, but you're one step removed. You've outsourced that responsibility to on an island. So that's an impact. I'm not saying that's better or worse, because obviously the financial system behind what we have now is better than what we had previously. But for the end user, they would say, and the feeling is out there, that it's not a better service for them. So I think that's worth taking on board. So which comes to like the first recommendation, really, the social costs. So would the chief exec do anything different this time? If you had to do the same project again, what would be the things that you would have thought the council could have done better?
On which particular bit? Because clearly we have different bits in place. This is an overarching collaboration agreement with a governance structure, and that is there to oversee it, and the scope which is set by members. And underneath the collaboration agreement are different bits that are very different. For instance, IT finance is a delegated arrangement, whilst for the fire and rescue is a partnership arrangement with I'm
talking about as a whole, thematically, are there things, obviously, because not everything would be naive, anyone would be naive to think that everything goes 100% right all the time. So I'm interested to hear your views on thematically, what, if you could do it again, what would you do differently?
I think that's difficult to answer as an overarching thing, because I think the overarching principles that were agreed by council, how we collaborate, so how we actually work in partnership with others is sound. I think the governance structure that we have put in place is sound, because that enables both democratic input, but also enables a certain to be reasonably fleet of foot to make decisions responding to the environment. So I think that is sound. Where I think I would have made some changes is in how the specific and individual arrangements have been put in place or delivered. So that's not around the governance, but it is around the assumptions made whilst we were putting the actual activities in place. Mm-hmm. For example, the IS and finance delegation was a massive change. There was a massive change in terms of systems, in terms of process. So that created a change for staff, created a change for the community, and created a change for people working on the other side. And I think what we could have done better is sit back and try to really understand what those changes meant for the individuals and do more training before we actually implemented the change. Some people would say it should have been done more gradually. Yeah, the change. So first do your IT, then do your finance, and then do it in little bits. I personally would disagree with that. I personally think it was the right decision, albeit it wasn't a choice, but it was the right thing that happened, that we did the whole thing in one go. Because change always is difficult. And you might as well have a large bit of change and then manage that effectively, which could have been managed better, I agree, than keep drip feeding change going forward.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, thank you. That's good to hear. I think, yeah, in terms of the assumptions, I think it's quite clear throughout the report that maybe next time, I think the hardness of understanding what went on and the denseness of this report is reflective of how the process happened for members here. I hold on one of the paragraphs there's a kind of assumption. I think it's paragraph, I can't find it now, but yeah, if there needs to be a clearer program of events, and I think members failed in their duty to ask questions, but they also were failed by officers to be given the information to ask the questions. So I think there is the last council that kind of culpable for not scrutinising the information enough, but officers as well were culpable for not giving the members enough information and explaining the options to them in order for members to ask questions. So, so in conclusion, I'd slightly disagree that the governance is right at the moment. There is whether we haven't had a report on the success or the targets met by the collaboration agreement or anything like that yet, any performance measures. And I would hope that those performance measures were defined at the start of the project and measured before as well, so we know what improvements we're getting. And that accountability, I think, again, like I was saying with the previous paper as well, I think full council needs to be more involved with that, well, full council scrutiny with those performance measures and those decisions that are made. So I'm just wary of the Quangoisation of decision making and it being passed down and being made less transparent. And at that point, I think I'll stop.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I concur with all of Councillor Marcus's points. I think just to pick up again on that social impacts of jobs, I mean, I think we just have, one step back. I think we recognise that the collaboration agreement has brought a lot of benefits. We were all clear about that, and many systems are working better than they were. But we do have to recognise that jobs were lost on the islands, and some of them are quite well paid. So I do think we have to just recognise that, and that's not particularly to say that's right or wrong, but it is clearly a social impact. And I think that's important to take forward in future partnership working. Let's just talk about the sponsor board. The sponsor board is the governance for this collaboration agreement. I'm picking up on Councillor Marcus's points. I mean, I think we do have an issue here around accountability. What is the intended frequency of the meetings? When did it last meet? And what's the reporting to full council, please?
Right. If you don't look at the sponsor board as a single item, look at the governance structure that's been put in place. And the sponsor board, as it says out in the paper, was put in place to provide the oversight and make the decisions that is related to both local authorities. Underneath is a steering group, and the steering group deals with operational issues and highlights issues that need to be escalated to the sponsor board. Yeah? Underneath that are the individual project teams, if you like. Yeah? So there's a project team for fire and rescue. There's a project team for information systems. There's a project team around finance, and that feeds in to the steering group. So that's how the governance works. The sponsor board is, in its terms of reference, needs to meet quarterly. Yeah? And the sponsor board is chaired by the chairman of the Isles of Scilly Council, and that is on purpose. There is also an elected member from Cornwall Council, which is the deputy leader of Cornwall Council, who sits on the sponsor board and provides the democratic input. So the purpose of the sponsor board is to provide the strategic oversight and deal with issues that are escalated. But also the sponsor board annually, and which is due at the end of the quarter this year, reviews how the collaboration has worked, which lessons have been learned, which areas need tightening or changing, and importantly, drafts a list or explores a list of areas that could be brought within the scope of future collaboration. There might be areas where we want to collaborate. The sponsor board then creates that list, if you like, and those areas will go to each respective council to review. So there will be forthcoming a report from the sponsor board to full council saying, this worked well, this didn't work so well, this is how the collaboration has performed, and these are the areas we propose as a sponsor board to explore over the next year or 2 years and develop into full collaborative arrangements. And that will go both to Cornwall Council and to our council. If both councils agree on which areas should be taken forward, then a project team will be set up and we'll start to work out how best to collaborate, because it's not always a delegation. Sometimes it's better to do it through a service level agreement. Sometimes it's better to do it through other arrangements you want to put in place.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. But just going back to my question, when were the last meetings and when was the last reporting to full council?
There hasn't been a full report to full council yet because we haven't had a full year running. So that will be coming in December, January sometime. The last meeting was cancelled. It was due to be in July, but it was cancelled. So due to availability. So the previous one was, I think, in April. So it's been a while, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to the report from that, because I think it's very important to come to members. I'd like to just pick up on the issue of risk. Reading through the report, I mean, there are several areas that I would highlight as proposed risk to the council. So in terms of risks. I mean, I've identified, for example, potential exit strategies, corporate memory, performance management clearly is a risk, finances are always a risk, and the resilience of services as well. I mean, I think we've actually seen there's been quite a few incidents where actually we haven't had monitoring officer cover, and that is clearly a risk, and that's a serious problem. So my question really is around what is the risk register on this collaboration agreement, and how often is that reviewed? And when do members scrutinise that?
The risk register is kept with the steering group and sponsor board, and at the moment is not coming to members of the individual local authorities. Because, as I said, the governance structure has been put in place to ensure that this collaboration is effective and efficient. And so therefore the sponsor board holds the pen, if you like, of the risk register. If there are certain areas of risk that require full or individual respective council input and decision, clearly it's the responsibility of the chairman of the sponsor board to take that to council.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that being an operational aspect of it being held by the sponsor board, but if that mechanism of not coming to members, not reporting to members isn't there, then, I would argue that actually we have substantial risk with this agreement and members aren't fully aware of that at the moment, and they should be. So I think that mechanism needs to be in place where the risk register is clearly scrutinised at sponsor board level, and any relevant risks actually come forward to members. So hopefully that will form part of that report. Yeah. Councillor Marcus picked up on public perception. I think we are still in a place where clearly there have been IT and finance issues. And as he says, you would expect any sort of teething issues with switch on of new services. They were substantial, as we recognised earlier in the year. And there are still some there now. And my question really is around the leadership of this collaboration, and essentially who, on an operational aspect, who is responsible for the implementation of this finance and IT switchover?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, who is responsible? Where does the buck stop, essentially?
Well, the buck stops, of course, with the sponsor board.
What I'm getting at is that I think what we've had a lot of is there's been problems with the IT and finance, which has affected members, it's affected staff, it's affected public. I think somebody needs to stand up and say, yes, I take ownership of these issues, I will sort them out, because they're still there. There are still public problems. There are public perception problems, and there are actual tangible problems that need sorting out.
But that's what I'm saying, you need to look what it is. If it is related to finance, clearly it's the section 151 that has the responsibility and duty to assure that those issues are being delivered and resolved. If it's issues around IT, it is the head of IT services that is responsible and responsive to resolve those issues. Those issues are being picked up through the steering group because there's regular reports, and there are reports going to the sponsor board on the lessons learned and what the issues are in IT. I think we need to be really careful, though, to just broadly say there are lots of issues, because, to be honest, the response to issues that arose were dealt with quickly, and there are not many issues remaining. And in terms of performance, however you want to define performance, but the collection rate is a good one, has significantly improved compared to previous years.
Well, that's good, and I think that feeds back into the point Councillor Marcus made around performance management. That's important for us to understand.
Well, which is reported, of course, through the normal full council reports on finance, which does give the figures around collection rates.
Yeah. And I think the point I'm getting at is that, the head of IT and section 151 officer are based in Cornwall. There needs to be, I think as a lesson learned, there needs to be more of a public face in terms of these projects, of somebody in the Council of the Isles of Scilly taking ownership of these projects.
Why?
Because there needs to be public face of saying,
Hang on. No, be careful what you say here. The Section 151 officer, is not a Cornwall Council 151 officer. The Section 151 officer is the Chief Finance Officer for the Council of the Isles of Scilly.
Yes, he is.
Members appointed the Chief Finance Officer in this position.
Yes,
so therefore, when that person operates, it wears a cap of Council of the Isles of Scilly. It's not a Cornwall Council.
Sure.
And it's not removed. It's
sure, but he doesn't live here and he hasn't been in the media, talking about the problems. That's my point. It's about public face.
The public face is members. Members are in the public media.
There's some operational aspects as well that should have been taken on a leadership level, I think. It's public perception. That's my point. It is all about public perception. And I think, to me, that is an important lesson learned.
That's an important lesson learned, and that's why members have a duty as well.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. I think officers do as well.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I think that's all my questions.
Are you finished? Right. Anybody else got any more questions? I'd just like to ask one question. On page 63, could you tell us or clarify where we are with the waste options? And
yes.
Where we are with the recycling?
We did do a paper, I think it was probably previous council. We intended to look at options to delegate part of our waste functions to Cornwall Council. So we explored the various models. We developed various business cases around this. And the conclusion was reached, and that this was reported in either FAS or full council, that at this point in time, it is not beneficial for the Council of the Isles of Scilly to delegate that function to Cornwall Council. So it was agreed that we would go to the market and procure, there's a very simple procurement exercise for the disposal of waste in the next few years. So it was agreed at the sponsor board that we would park this scope, if you like, around waste for the moment and carry on with the best, the most advantageous solution for the Isles of Scilly, the use procurement.
Just one point on the sponsor board. I think in the agreement it should sit quarterly. Am I right in saying?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Has it been sitting quarterly?
No, what I just explained.
Yeah.
It has been sat quarterly ordinarily.
Yes.
But
hopefully it will get back to being.
Will be back. Absolutely.
To be sat quarterly. And I do get where Councillor Smith was coming from. I think the public perception is that they do have people to go to. We know that, but they don't know who to go to if they have a problem with their bills or us with our iPads. I mean, I think we've probably got that more or less that we can come up here or we can get Tom to get in touch with someone. But I think the public perception is, because we haven't got a finance officer here, or an IT person here, that they've got nobody to go to sort their bills out. And I think maybe it needs a leaflet put round to say, you can go to the one-stop shop, the library, or down there where they can get help. I think that's what Councillor Smith was getting at, that there needs to be someone to promote that.
I think it needs a bit of time of bedding in. It's a different way of operating. Clearly, there is a lot more availability, and that's one of the positive areas, of course. So the services, and particularly around bill payments, is no longer dependent on one person and whether that person is in the office. There's actually a team available. The issue is that people need to use the right route into that.
Yeah.
And I think that probably needs a bit more explanation.
I think so. I think so. I'd also agree with Councillor Marcus that as members, we didn't ask enough questions in our last council over the collaboration. And I believe the business case should have come to full council, which it didn't. But that's lessons learned, I think. Has anybody else got any more questions?
Yeah, just like to say, Chairman, sorry, it's just, it would be good, I think it's highlighted in the recommendations, but it'd be good to strengthen the governance pathways that are apparent now, because this is a new way of working. We've outsourced that governance model, and it's not about, like we said in the previous item, it's not about individuals, it's about the system. The system has to work and be robust and be resilient. It obviously wasn't robust and resilient when these decisions were being made, because there would have been no confusion if there was, and this paper wouldn't have been so hard to understand. We just need to make sure that that is a lesson learned. And I'd like it to be taken back to the sponsor board that those meetings are quarterly. They can't be postponed just because people can't make it. They need to be quarterly, because this is, if it's not a major impact for Cornwall, it's definitely a major impact for us. So yeah, so on that point, the proposed recommendations?
No, I agree with quarterly frequency is important, because that of course is the backbone of your governance arrangement. What I do take issue with is the wording that we have outsourced governance. We haven't. It's our governance. It's a governance that was put in place by this council and the council of Cornwall Council, and so it's an agreed governance structure that to ensure the independence, if you like, of each council and still work in collaboration.
Okay, so maybe outsourced is the wrong word, but there's a definite distance from where it was previously to where it is now, and that distance may be perception or real.
I think it's perception, to be honest.
Yeah, but that has to be managed with, and that probably wasn't explored. Well, my conclusion is that that wasn't explored properly by the last council. They failed on that count. So. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to make just a wider point regarding lessons learned. I mean, I think essentially in scrutiny, you know, we are here to scrutinise and ultimately to learn lessons, and that is obviously very, very important stuff.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. Here we are. Here we are.
I'll carry on.
Sorry, carry on.
Just regarding lessons learned, in terms of, you know, obviously we talk a lot about lessons learned. We talked about it today, which is all, I think, positive. That's very good. Is there a kind of a register of lessons learned, if you like? Where are they being held so that actually they are then of use to future projects?
In relation to this specifically, or scrutiny?
Anything, any lessons.
In relation to this specific arrangement, there is a sponsor board which is taking place early November, 6th of November, and one part of the agenda is to review the lessons learned report. So over the last year, whilst we were implementing some of the changes, we've been keeping a log of lessons learned. There have been workshops with senior staff and with senior officers around lessons learned. So that's now all been captured, which will go to the sponsor board on the 6th of June, which will then do a final report on that.
Sure, well, that's good. And not just in this particular aspect, but anything that we've scrutinised that has, you know, important. Is there a big lessons learned book somewhere?
it's not a lessons learned book, but what there is, of course, is the recommendations that Scrutiny make, either to itself or to full council.
Fine, as long as they're captured, that's the main thing.
Right, any more questions? No? Right, could I have a proposer for recommendations? Shall we take them both together, 1 and 2?
I'll propose those, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Could I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second those.
Councillor Watt, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot that one. And recommendations for committee? Could I have a
Yeah, I'll propose
Councillor
that.
Smith, seconder. Councillor Watt, all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Part 2 is for information only. So I close the meeting at 11:05.
He does chair responsible. You'd like all to know that he has been trying really hard, as Taylor will confirm, to reconvene responsible at the earliest opportunity after it's cancelled. And it was probably an unavailability of personnel that led to the difficulties. So without needing to be confirmed again, I'd like to say that he has been trying his best. He's now going to be on November the 6th.
Right, okay. We shall look forward to that.
Yeah, it was the horror of having to